All right, hey folks. So today we're going to be talking about the now infamous Arnold "Screw Your Freedom" quote, and I want to kind of deep dive into that from three different angles. One, just sort of looking at Arnold and his past history and looking at who the man is, and why this quote is perhaps not a surprise. And then secondly, the word freedom and the sort of powerful emotions that it brings out. And thirdly, the consequences when you're in a debate of not listening to the other side. So stay tuned. That's the topics that I want to kind of flesh out today. And I want to know what you guys think. So if you have any questions or comments, pop them down below. Let's crack on. Firstly, I think people forget who Arnold is. We know Arnold as the 70-year-old or, 50s, still making movies at 2000. So for those who are relatively young, who only really know him from the past, say, couple of decades, like, this is who Arnold is. Let's just remind ourselves.
First of all, because her father introduced me to stogies, and second of all, because I'm a stud. I'm ballsy. I don't take no shit from anyone. I smoke my stogie anywhere I want. I don't have to find a hideout place like you.
All right. So that's all. I don't think people remember that. Like, if Arnold was around, as in, if a young Arnold was around today, he would have the biggest social media following. He would dwarf The Rock completely. I guarantee you, because that's what he was like. That was his personality. He was purposely inflammatory. He's the guy who would talk shit to his competitors on stage, like Frank Zane, and distract them. He did all that kind of stuff. He's the guy who was getting into Lou Ferrigno's head before all that was a thing. Like, he was ruthless, and he literally said what he was, like, alpha of alphas. So I think people kind of forget that. And so whatever his point of view is, whether you think he's right or whether he's wrong, whatever. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the delivery of the message. He was speaking in an interview where he was speaking very much just natural prose. And all of a sudden, a little bit of unscripted Arnold came out. But that's Arnold. Like, we can't expect anything different of the guy. That's who he is. He speaks like that. He speaks very openly and very honestly. And, that's whatever he says, you got to admire the fact that he's honest, he's open. Now, I wanted to put that out there because I don't think people sort of really appreciate what he's like. That's essentially who he is. That's how I know him anyway. It's not a surprise. I don't remember him now as 70-year-old Arnold. I remember him as when he was younger, and that's the kind of stuff he would do. But anyway, next sort of point that I wanted to talk about was the word freedom and its sort of connotations. I think this is probably one of the reasons why it was such a damaging thing to say. I do actually think he regrets it now. I don't think he said it. He said it very much when he was in the flow of conversation. He was getting excited, and he just sort of said it. I think he kind of regrets it now because he's sort of circled around it since and backtracked a little bit. Not out and out apologize, but I think he regrets it. Now, I've got quite a lot of American friends, and the word freedom, rather than just what it means, even just the word freedom has a lot of, it's a very emotionally charged word. And I think it was for Arnold to say that in that particular way. I think that's why it touched a lot of people's nerves, and they did get triggered by it, I guess. But that's fine. Like, people get triggered, and I think they did sort of get upset about it, and there was connotations around it saying, yeah, we don't, and there's going to be some backlash. So yeah, it's a very particular thing. I mean, I have this conversation with my American friends. Like, I love the UK. I love England as much as anyone else. I love England as much as any American loves America. But it's different for us. We don't out and out say, yeah, we don't you tend to verbalize it in that way. So it kind of gives off the impression that perhaps other people in other countries don't love their country as much as they do. But actually they do. It's just the verbiage is different. And what Arnold did was he hit upon that verbiage. And that, I think, is what was so damaging, rather than just the actual, content of the message. I think the way he delivered it was particularly damaging. Now, the last thing is I want to talk about the actual content of what he said, because you have people on either side of the fence. Okay, some people don't want to be wearing masks. Some people don't want lockdown. Some people don't want even the vaccine. Okay, and then you have other people who say, yes, fine, do the lockdown, wear the masks, take the vaccine. Let's just try and get through this. What I got really worried about when I was in lockdown last year was people just weren't listening to each other. So I recall specifically a number of gym owners were getting quite high profile press coverage because they refused to close their gyms because they didn't see the point in it. And the data at the time supported, after the first lockdown, during the second and third lockdown, the data at the time supported the idea that there's a case to be made for gyms to stay open because of the health benefits and the blah, 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 all that kind of thing. It's a complicated issue. Well, I'm not saying it was a definitely keep the gyms open. All I'm saying is it was worthy of discussion. But those people weren't even getting heard. And I remember hearing this on the news when I was driving the car on the way to the gym. And they were talking about how there were these riots and there were people breaking into gyms and there was like people training illegally in gyms, and then the police were coming to break it up. And I think it was Nathan Diash's gym in Liverpool where a few people got hurt by the police because they were training in the gym and they had to run out. So my thoughts were people aren't being listened to, and that's a very dangerous situation. When you have a large group of people who believe in a certain thing and you're closing the door towards even putting their discussion on the table, that is a very dangerous thing. And so the third point of what I want to make about Arnold is the actual content of what he said. Screw your freedom is a very definitive statement. And it's very much like, I don't want to discuss this, go away, that's the way it is kind of statement. I don't think that's healthy. Again, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with him because I want to keep my own personal sort of beliefs out of this. But if you completely shut off a whole large group of people's argument and like their feelings, just deny them what they're feeling, if you shut that off, even if it's for the greater good, you're going to create a situation that you're going to isolate those people and you're going to create a group out of those people, like an extremist group out of those people. It's like simple social whatever. So I don't like that aspect. From my point of view, I think if it's a reasonable argument, it needs to be heard, put on the table, so at least it can be discussed, played around with, and it might not be agreed, it might not be passed. Ultimately, you might go ahead and do the same thing you were going to do anyway, but it means that at least those people feel heard. And I don't think that was happening over last lockdown. It was something that concerned me during the previous lockdown. And when Arnold said this again, my mind immediately went to, this is the same thing happening again. People aren't listening to each other. Screw your freedom is a very definitive statement, and it can be a very damaging statement because you're basically saying, I'm shutting the door to hearing what you've got to say. That's what I don't like about it. I think there's better ways of having that discussion. And I do think it was very much a lapse in judgment from Arnold. I think that's kind of what it was. So yeah, that is my thoughts. Firstly, I don't expect anything different from Arnold because that's who he is. Regardless of whether you agree with him or disagree with him, like the way he delivers what his opinion is emphatic, always has been. Secondly, I think there is a large amount of emotional attachment to that word freedom, particularly in America. And thirdly, I think not listening to the other side of a debate when you are debating someone is absolutely the worst idea whatsoever. Then it's not debate, it's just like a dictatorship. And I know Arnold wasn't dictating anything, but you know what I mean? It's just, it shuts off the other side to having any kind of opinion and just says, there it is, I'm not listening, I don't care about you. And so how do you expect people to listen to you if you're not going to listen to them? It's communication 101. It is. Right, folks, I'd love to hear what you guys think. I've not addressed it on this channel, but those are my thoughts coming out of it. And I've got a few others as well, but I'll leave it there for now. I'll speak to you guys next time. Take care.